Welcome to the University of San Francisco's School of Management event on Black Women Founders. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sonia Martin-Poole. I'm a professor of marketing at the University of San Francisco. We are delighted to be hosting this event featuring Black women entrepreneurs. Black women have become a potent economic force, and for years, Black women have created new businesses at a rapid clip, far outpacing other racial and ethnic groups. Black women start businesses at a rate of 10 times the national average and represent 42% of new women-owned businesses. That's 3 times their share of the female population. Black women represent 36% of all Black-owned employer businesses, and 17% of Black women are in the process of starting or running a new business, compared to 10% of white women and 15% of white men. What's behind this surge? A few things. High levels of educational attainment, coupled with overcoming barriers to corporate advancement, have prompted Black women to pursue a path that involves running their own businesses. And yes, there are instances where Black women are getting pushed out of corporate environments, but we're also getting pulled by passions, pulled by desires to build legacies, to create intergenerational wealth, pulled to fill gaps and create. Black women are creating opportunities and filling voids in the marketplace. All this matters because when small businesses flourish, so do communities. And Black business owners often intentionally locate themselves in Black and brown spaces, acting as economic spigots. Black women are positioned to play an increasingly visible and important role in the United States political and economic future, particularly with the election of the first Black woman vice president and the widespread call for change embodied in the movement for Black lives. Never before have we seen such a potential for Black women to elevate their voice and careers and to achieve social and economic equality. And so we thought the time was just perfectly right for a reality-based conversation around this really, really important topic. We couldn't have a better panel, a better group of people to be talking about this with you today. And I'm going to kick it off by introducing our moderator for this event, Netta Jenkins. Netta is an entrepreneur and a leading voice in the diversity, equity, and inclusion field. She has been featured in Black Enterprise, Forbes, Business Insider, Blavity, CNN, and other media outlets for her work. Along the way, Netta has won multiple awards for her impact on corporate and startup diversity. She was named by LinkedIn as a top voice for equity by Forbes, and as one of the top 7 anti-racism consultants in the world, and by CIO Views as one of the top 10 most influential Black women in business to follow in 2021. Netta is an acclaimed author with an extensive background in communications, leadership, and behavioral psychology. For more than 15 years, she has been advising corporations and audiences of all kinds. Netta is the founder of Holistic Inclusion Consulting, LLC, and offers diversity and anti-racism sessions to companies seeking change and to gain understanding of systemic racism, employee equity and fairness, and managing through trauma. She has many, many more accolades to her credit, and also, more importantly for our purposes today, she is really the perfect moderator for this topic. So thank you so much, Netta, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Enjoy.
Thank you so much, Sonia, for that lovely introduction. I am so excited because we are celebrating Black History Month. Now, Black History Month is American history, and we have incredible Black women who are here to drop gems, so please take some notes. But before we jump into our dynamic conversation today, I want to check in with all of you. How are you feeling? Are you feeling inspired? See, I want all of us to leave here feeling motivated to live the life we want starting today. But first, let's acknowledge what might be standing in the way of us pursuing a career that has more uncertainty. How many of you have experienced rejection in your life? How many of you have submitted so many job descriptions and you're just over the process? You've been submitting your resume. Who's trying to keep up with the Kardashians? You know what I mean. Are you only applying to the top tech firms, Google, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, and feeling frustrated that you're not landing an interview? Maybe you landed an interview but didn't get the offer. How many of you have started a business or want to start a business, but you're concerned about the lack of funding you may receive or what your family may think? See, I understand the feeling you may have because I've been there. Today, our panelists have felt layers of rejection, but we are here to tell you that the road may be covered with snow today and you may be stuck, but we will help you with the tools to plow through it. So these are the questions that most entrepreneurs have at the beginning of starting a company. Are you ready to hear what it took for us to take the next step and learn as we went? I am super excited to introduce Joy, Karen, and Xiomara. Joy is a creative and visionary entrepreneurial leader whose passion for beauty and wellness led her to leave corporate America and launch twin companies, Harmony Beauty Boutique and Harmony Yoga Pilates, a unique brand of personal care products and wellness services. Propelled by her natural hair journey, she discovered that she could have it all, curly too, straight without harsh chemicals. This hair awareness led her to form I Love Curls, a brand of products that transforms your curl drama into a love story. Joy was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area, holds a BS in Information Systems Management from the University of San Francisco, serves as the vice chair of the advisory board of her alma mater, is a Christian ministry leader, and contributes to social impact causes that benefits women of color. Welcome, Joy.
Thank you.
Karen Hayes. Over the past 26 years, she's worked as a fast rising executive at Procter & Gamble, an entrepreneur in the beauty industry, and now as director of strategic engagement for an independent school in Oakland. She began interning there at age 17, then started full-time in sales at Procter & Gamble after graduating from Howard University. Her last roles included successfully selling off the Pringles brand and serving as digital and mobile manager for North America, leading the company's overall strategic direction. Karen also received her MBA from the Haas School of Business. But after marrying and having her son, the travel her job required became less sustainable given her shift in priorities. Committed to creating a platform for women of all backgrounds to come together and celebrate, she opened Bounce Blow Dry Bar in Oakland, a beauty salon specializing in all hair types to celebrate diversity and build community. The venture became a success, earning her local recognition and national attention from the likes of the New York Times and Good Morning America. She opened a second salon in Berkeley and created a pop-up at the W Hotel in San Francisco. The salon did so well, and she knew she had created a profitable model that could support growth, so she knew it was time to move on to her next business endeavor. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone.
And Xiomara Rosa Tedla. She is co-owner with her father for a company called UNOF, meaning One Ethiopia. It goes back to their roots and partners with artisans in Addis Ababa to craft handmade leather handbags, totes, backpacks, duffels, and accessories. I am so excited to have all three of you, and welcome, Xiomara.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So let's dive into this meeting conversation today. I'd love to start off with, what was your first exposure to entrepreneurship? But I'd love to hear that from you, Xiomara.
My first, inspiration for entrepreneurship.
Your first exposure.
My first exposure, my apologies. My first exposure was through my mother and my grandmother. My mother is an attorney with, she has her own law firm, and she has owned her firm for probably about 20 years now. And my second inspiration and exposure is through my grandmother, who's always had multiple businesses throughout my lifetime. And even during when she was 70 years old, she started a business started a restaurant. I've always been inspired and exposed through entrepreneurship through my family.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Karen, I would love to hear from you. What was your first exposure to entrepreneurship?
Well, it's interesting. I think of entrepreneurs as people who have not just the ability, but the desire to live life on their own terms. There are people who have this intrinsic passion to not just see a problem, but find a solution. So as I think about what entrepreneurship, I'd have to say, I've been an entrepreneur my entire life.
Right. I love that, right? And I'd love to hear from you, Joy. What was your first exposure to entrepreneurship?
My first exposure to entrepreneurship was, playing outside with friends, right? I always had a keen attraction to leadership and to, creating business. Didn't know what the word was, didn't know how to name it. But, when I was a child, I was the one that was always forming, a group. And then I'd like, we have to find our way to support the group financially. So we're going to make things and sell them. Right. So, I come from a family, I'm the first generation entrepreneur, but always had an entrepreneurial spirit, knew, early on that this is the direction that I was going to go.
Right. I love that. I can definitely relate to that. Always creating things, especially as a young child. And what's interesting is the way that we're exposed to entrepreneurship is, vastly different, right? It's different for each of us. But when do we decide to listen to that voice in us, right? Because there was something very pivotal, Joy, that you had said, you didn't know how to name it. You didn't quite know what that was. Right. But when did you decide to listen to your voice? Love to hear from you, Joy.
I decided to listen to the voice when I was, about a decade into my corporate career. For some reason, I was always in a situation in which I was supporting small business, even, as I took jobs in college, I would, work for a small business and, really got to understand what that operation looked like. And then when I went into sales at AT&T, my first group of accounts was small business, right? Until about a decade into my career, I was like, I need to use my skills to pursue passion, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I started to formulate bath and body products, took a lot of courses, learned a lot about the craft, and I just took the leap.
I love that. And you started to listen to yourself. That's one of the hardest things for us as human beings to do sometimes. Karen, how did it happen for you?
I think that's a really interesting question. Yeah. And as I think about it, I have always been one to listen to my inner voice. And the real work was in maintaining and developing a strong sense of self along the way. So that's one thing I always tell young people and young people in particular to do is do the work. Take the time to really develop that strong sense of self before even thinking about embarking on any new endeavor. And having that strong sense of self is really about knowing your strengths, taking the time to tap into that inner voice to really understand who you are and what you bring to the table, being very clear on what brings you happiness, because ultimately only you know what happiness is for you. And then last but not least, being very clear on your personal values and never wavering. And so when you learn to really tap into that inner voice and become confident in it and allow it to guide you, knowing that the path that it guides you on might not always be the right path or the best path, but being grounded in who you are, your strengths, being grounded in what brings you joy, and defining your personal values, in my opinion, will always steer you correctly.
Yeah. And I love what you said, right? What brings you the most happiness, right? What really ignites you? That's your inner voice. That's part of your inner voice trying to knock on the door there. Hey, hello, and get your attention. Thank you so much for sharing those steps that people can take to kind of find that inner voice there, because I think that's really important as things come up for you and get you excited about potentially starting your own business. Xiomara, I'd love to hear from you. What was that for you?
I think for me, it was not only is there a bunch of internal intuition is kind of screaming out, but sometimes you try to like silence it because you have this focus of what you think is right. You think that, oh, I'm in this corporate ladder. I'm going to keep going. And that's what everyone has told you what you should follow. Like, okay, I'm doing everything what, society tells me to do. But I also started to take into inventory of what the other signs were coming from me, from the universe, from other people, from just small signs of, maybe you should start this business. Oh, where can I get this bag? Or just little small things that started to pile on throughout the days. And I'm like, okay, I think I should listen to this. I mean, it's not negative, it's very positive. So maybe I should look into this and do some more research. And once I started to follow, like, what this actually makes me feel really good. Okay. Yeah. Like if this is really good, then I think this is kind of the right path that I should take. So it's a little bit of, internal work, and then also just kind of assessing what is coming your way.
Yeah. And I think the word that really resonates for me when I listen to all of you share your story here is spark, right? That spark that really ignites you. How does that feel, right? What type of emotion did you feel during that time? I'd love to hear from you, Joy.
I talked about passion before, right?
Yeah.
Leading the way to purpose, excitement, joy, and peace.
Right. Say that again, please, for the people in the back.
Yeah.
Peace.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Karen, how about you? What is that spark? What is that feeling and that emotion?
I think that's a really great question. I can tell you what it's not first. What it's not is complacency and the status quo. I have good, bad, right, wrong, always been that one to buck the system when I feel complacent or feel as though I'm being forced into a box and having to adhere to a standard that I didn't set for myself. And so as I think about what is it that gives me that feeling of spark, it's transformation. It's knowing that I'm doing something that's transformative, knowing that I'm doing something that really is paving the way for someone other than myself, because I do believe this world, this life that we live is so much greater than any one of us. And each of us are here to really be conduits for others to come into their greatness. So when I am a part of transforming, when I am a part of others coming into themselves, I get this spark, I get this fire that just cannot be put out.
Ooh, yes. And what's really interesting is, and Joy, I know you had hinted at this, passion, right? Oftentimes when people think about purpose and passion, you don't think about the fear, right? Behind it. You can be passionate about something, but there can be a lot of fear and it can be scary. When was it scary for you?
I'll start.
Yeah.
I'm a person of faith, and faith and fear can't exist in the same space. So there's no fear.
Okay.
Sure, right? I'm going to learn something, fearful of what?
Right.
No matter what happens, there's going to be value in every situation. And I'm expecting great things.
Right. So, and I love that you brought your values into, what you were going through as you were building your business. Tamar, I'd love to hear from you. Was it ever scary at any point, right? Because there's that spark that happens, but then it's like, oh, wait, hold on now. What have I gotten myself into?
For me, there's always some level of fear with each level. And it's completely human and normal and natural. You can have a lot of passion for what you do. Say, for instance, if you're an artist and you love to paint, but you don't want to have your first show because you're fearful of what other people may think. I definitely had some fear in the beginning because I was unsure of how this business was going to be portrayed or accepted, rejected, and things like that. There are levels of fear of just growing in general. If you're scaling your business, bringing on employees, or just in general, just moving on to different levels and expanding into different areas you've never been in by yourself. Like, sure, if you're, within a corporate company and things like that, it's a little different because you have backing, you have teams, but this one, you're just by yourself for the most part. And so fear comes, but I think it's just, there's a lot of personal development work that I have done to kind of bat that away in terms of reading great books or being surrounded by amazing people who are super supportive and positive, and creating that mindset that really makes you stronger and to just kind of jump.
And continue to go, right? Continue to grow what you are passionate about. Karen, what was your experience? Can you tell us a bit about the scary moments for you within your business?
I listen to that and I chuckle a little because similarly, that fear always exists. Mm-hmm. And it's that in and of itself is not the issue. The issue is what you do with it. Mm-hmm. And for me, when starting my business, it was this fear of failure. That was the most scary. And it was the fear that I wouldn't be able to grow enough, to be enough to really support the people who were depending upon me, people who expected a paycheck at the end of the week to be able to feed their family and take care of themselves. But interestingly enough, it's that fear of failure that really propels me and is my greatest source of energy, because I just firmly believe that failure is not an option. Success might not look the way that I envisioned it originally, but failing won't happen. And so I really try to use that fear of failure to propel me to do even greater things.
I love that. And thank you all for sharing and dropping so many gems. But for our students and virtual audience here, for these individuals that may be trying to push through some of the self-doubt of maybe starting a business or possibly getting hired at the company that they want to get hired at, how do they push through this? What are some tips that you can provide that can get them through this process? I'd love to hear from you, Joy.
Well, I think that Karen, she hit the nail on the head, and that she suggested that, she's going to use it, right? You're going to use that fear. You're going to diffuse that energy. You're going to transform that energy into something that you can use, right? And so instead of focusing on the fear, focusing on the rejection, put more emphasis on the things that you can do, right? You can network. You can work to expand your network. You can work to get more information, more knowledge about the direction that you're going in. Really tapping into resources, whether it be internal or external, and building on those things to press forward.
Yeah. And I love that, because one of the things I always share and I say with folks is find your tribe, right? Find the folks that you really know that you can lean on. It's not always going to be an easy path. right? As much as you'd like it to be. And everyone's path is different. Don't look at someone else's path and say, okay, well, why is this happening for them, but it's not happening for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a part of that is also retooling your mindset. Xiomara, I'd love to hear from you. Any tips to kind of get folks pushing through any self-doubt?
Sure. I think that one of the things that I've especially learned during 2020 and 2021 is that if I have done everything that I can in my power in driving towards a certain goal, say if I'm applying for a job, if I've made sure that I have applied for the jobs that I want, I've followed up on from the interviews, whatever it may be, then all I can do is just rest at this point. Same the thing happens for when I'm pursuing my business and trying to secure my supply chain management and everything that's going on with all the issues that are going on globally right now. If I've done everything that I can, that I know that my work is done there, and to have the faith that everything is going to work out, whether we know that it is or it's not, like having that faith that, okay, I've done everything that I can, and that's all that I can do. And what is for me will come to me, whether I'm least expecting it. And I think another thing that really, I was having a conversation with a friend earlier today, is that activity really creates, like it dissipates all of the fear and the anxiety and the worry that something's not going to happen. So keep working towards your goal, whether if it's like researching, whether if it's gaining more knowledge or networking more, or just being better in any way, the space that you can, really helps in so many more ways than you think. Like it will come in like in times when you really need it. Yeah.
Well, so you just mentioned networking, which is a big one. I'm sure many people want to hear about that. How do you go about networking in the world of COVID that we're in, right? We're in this virtual world. How do you do it so it's authentic and it's genuine? Would love to hear from you, Xiomara, and then I'd kick it off to you, Karen.
Sure, absolutely. I grew up an only child, so I had to make friends. I was kind of a social butterfly growing up, so it kind of came a little bit naturally for me. But during this time of COVID, being in person is like where I thrive, where I can meet, make conversation and things like that. But during 2020, 2021, where we're kind of hunkering down and things like that, it definitely happened. It is great for during social media, which is really great, sliding to DMs. It's creating connections through friends of friends of friends. And it's not what you know, it's really who you know and how they can put you in these different spaces, and really utilizing your network of who can really help you. And the thing is, a lot of people want to help you. And I think a lot of the ways that we get in our own way by not asking, by not just creating the opportunity within ourselves. What's the worst that can happen? That someone says no, like, okay, fine. Next, go on to the next person,
Right.
So that's kind of like one of the best things, is that using your phone, texting, emailing, DMing, LinkedIn is a great network as well. There's so many different platforms for you to connect. So we're in the digital world, and we just have to get out of our own way and just press send.
Yeah. Is there a social site that you're seeing the most success on in terms of connecting with individuals?
For myself, is actually Instagram.
Okay.
It actually is. It's Instagram. I think that it's because there's social proof on there, based on, like, say, if you guys follow the same people or have mutual connections and things like that. And, people can see your work. I mean, social media is where we put our business, our personal and business out there. So it's kind of like a resume in a way. And it really helps that, to connect really easily. You could slide into anybody's DMs, really. And I think that's really been one of the best ways for me. There's also been Clubhouse as well, which has also been like a really great place to find information and connect with like-minded individuals as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Karen would love to hear about how would you go about building a network?
Interestingly enough, I think it would be building upon all that we've just heard. I think it's really important to remember that building a network is about building relationships and it's about building knowledge. So a couple of things that I always tell people as they're embarking on this journey to build a network is, one, attend networking events. But don't just attend a networking event for the sake of attending it. Be really clear on what your agenda and what your goal is before you get there. And if you're an introvert, bring a friend. Have someone who is going to be that buffer, that icebreaker for you. The second thing is always remember that you're on, even when you're not. There are always opportunities to learn, to gain knowledge, to tap into resources, often in some of the most unexpected places. The third thing I always say is know your worth. Know your worth and be able to articulate your worth in the form of an elevator pitch, a sit down long dinner, but be very clear on what you bring to the table and why people would want to be a part of your tribe. Don't be afraid to ask for questions. Be bold. I think, and last but not least, the one thing that I learned, and it was hard, is be sure to follow up. Find a reason to follow up. There's always a reason. But I'd say 90% of the people go into building a network and networking and never close the loop and wonder why or how they fall short. So for me, it's about building the relationships and building the knowledge. And those are the types of things that I've done to continuously, because it is a continuous process, build my network.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. But let's be honest now. Networking comes with rejection. Oh. It comes with a whole lot of no's, right? And we've all experienced that. Joy. Bring some joy to us. Bring some joy to us. How does one deal with rejection after rejection? After rejection.
Right. Well, I mean, it's always good to do a temperature check, right? Yeah. To get feedback and understand the why, right? You can use that information to, for fuel to move forward and, with a different strategy.
Yeah.
You can't take it personally. I mean, and even if you can take it personally, it's a waste of your time, right?
Right.
Because you're getting off path of, you're getting away from your objective, and your objective is to move forward. So, get the information and increase your competency.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for that. Definitely. Samara, would love to hear from you.
Rejection. It's, I welcome it. I think that it is a part of any type of journey, whether if it's in business or dating or whatever it may be. But rejection, the more no's I receive, well, this is during my sales career, the more no's I received, the closer I was to my yes. And that was the yes that I was actually really wanting, as opposed to the other 50 no's that I've received before. And the funny thing is that after you get rejected from those first 50 and maybe a year or two later, you keep being successful, you keep going on your path, those no's come back and like, hey, remember that conversation we had, blah, blah, blah. Yes, I remember, blah, blah. So I think that I welcome it. It's just a part of the journey. It makes you stronger, makes you tougher and things like that. But you just gotta, dust your shoulders off and keep going. That's just what it is.
Right. You can't stop. You can't stop. And I just want to kind of switch gears a little bit and start diving into business processes, right? What are the core steps that one should take to grow their business, no matter which industry they're in, right? They have all these tips as to how to network, how to handle rejection, but how do they build their business? What are some of those core processes? Love to hear from you, Karen.
I think that's a great question. And I love that you ask it in the context of there are some things that hold true, regardless of the industry that you're in. And I like to think of myself as an eternal entrepreneur. I'm always building and trying to grow. And what I would say is, first and foremost, know your season. So growth doesn't have to happen every day. And so when you know your season and you're clear, it really sets you up to focus on your base. And that's the second thing. Understand your customers. Hear from them what it is they're wanting, what they need, so that you really can solidify that base. So know your season, understand your customers, solidify your base. And then what I would say is enroll your network. What are you not thinking about? What are you missing? Who can help you? Who can help you craft a plan that's going to propel you even further? And then last but not least, continuously evaluate your new position. Because you may not be setting out to grow your business per se, but if you're taking the right steps, doing the right things, you are always growing. And so there's an art to reflecting, to really understanding your position at every step along the way, and reflecting on that to build greater, bigger plans is really important.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Joy, I would love to hear from you. Are there core steps that you definitely recommend and that perhaps you took within your business?
Well, you know, Karen just taught a whole class.
She sure did.
She definitely did that.
It's the 26 years.
Karen, we're waiting on that book.
You know, I'll just interject a couple of things. You know, develop your superpower. You know, focus on what you bring to the table. What is your objective, you know, and how can you build on that core competency, right, to have a superpower? So it's about being curious, right? It's about, you know, being prepared to do research and analysis and, you know, buckling down and being ready to improve.
Yeah, and I love what you said around tapping into your superpower. Oftentimes we don't tap into that deep enough because we all have it within us.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I even say to myself, it takes spending that time alone, being silent, right? Finding that space to identify what that superpower can do for you. So I love that you brought that point up. Would love to hear a little bit about growth mindset, because I think that's a part of the core step. You know, at least for me, reshifting and retooling my mindset was very critical in how I started to navigate within even my business, within the clients that I was gaining as well. I knew not every single client was for me. It was okay for me to reject people too, right? So reshifting and retooling that mindset. Seymour, I'd love to hear from you. What would you say about growth mindset? What's like the importance of that in terms of having that in business?
I believe in growth mindset. I believe there's a lot of personal development work that needs to be done for yourself, first and foremost. This can entail reading a lot of personal development books, or business books. It can be in terms of networking and going to a lot of panels or talks and things like that. It can entail just immersing yourself in lots of knowledge and being surrounded by like-minded people. I think that's really important, because if you allow the wrong type of person to get into your mind, they will poison everything. They will poison your outlook. They will poison your ambition, your motivation. It's literally toxic, and just from one person. So I think it's really important that, you know, you have that mindset, and also to really take into account, make sure that you're looking at your goals and benchmarking. Like, okay, am I here yet? Okay, what are the next steps that I need to do to get to where I need to be? And really just being real with yourself. Like, am I doing the things I need to do? Am I doing a lot of self-care Sundays, not just on Sunday? Like,
right.
Am I doing the things I really need to do? Be realistic. And I think also what I have is a lot of accountability partners that can really, I work right by myself. So I don't have a manager giving me a quarterly report or annual review or like, hey, or check-ins and things like that of what I'm doing right or wrong. And so I think that that's really important to have when you work for yourself, or in general in life. I think that people should have those types of coaches. or mentors and things like that, so that you can really make sure that you're on the growth path, positive path, and just the path that you really want to be taking. So I think that's just on, especially in terms of mindset, but I'm always pushing myself and reading a lot and listening to, it could be anyone from Tony Robbins to Oprah or whoever, the greats that are really, I'm just trying to walk in their shoes.
Yeah. I like what you said, around making sure you have the right people around you and understanding those that are giving you, information. Sometimes it's coming from a good place. I kind of think back to, both of my parents are African. And so their focus was like, you can only select 3 occupations we all know of: doctor, lawyer, engineer. And so if you're not one of those 3, they're looking at you as if you're a failure, right? So the concept of you want to start your own business and you don't have funding and all of these other ideas. So it also sometimes comes from good places, but be aware of like who is saying it, and are they in that position? Have they gone through that? Are they maybe just, their fear is coming into play as well. So such a great point. I want to kind of dive in, Karen, with you about how does one begin to scale their business? And I know you are a serial entrepreneur, right? So talk to us a little bit about scaling. How does one do that?
It's interesting. I love that question after the growth mindset question, because before you can think about scaling, you've got to ensure that you have that growth mindset. It is essential if you're going to forge a path forward for your business. And forging that path forward may sometimes feel like an uphill battle. Mm-hmm. And on good days, it actually feels like a downhill sprint. But it's never going to be steady Eddie one way all the time. And so you've got to wrap your mind around what is it that you are working to do to get that clarity, to get that focus. And then it's about cultivating resiliency.
Yeah.
Think about it. It's not always going to be easy. You're not always going to have those supporters in your corner that are giving you guidance based on their experience and based on wanting the best for you. So you've got to cultivate that resiliency. You've got to reflect on your setbacks.
Yeah.
And be okay. We talked a lot about rejection. Be okay with that. Take the time to really reflect and then continuously anticipate and take calculated risks. Never get stuck in the status quo because it is that flat road. It's not feeling like an uphill battle and it's not the whirlwind of a downward sprint, but really being very mindful and consciously to think ahead, to anticipate and to take calculated risks. And for my business and starting it, it was really important that I focused on hiring the right people. So the people were really the backbone of what I offered. You wouldn't want me anywhere near you with water, shampoo, or blow dryer. It would be a disaster. Right. So I needed to make sure that I had the right people around me. Get very clear on your revenue source. It can be very challenging. And for me, because I funded my business myself, that forced me to move in a different way. It forced me maybe to go a little bit slower than I would have liked, but you've got to be adaptable. So learn how to be adaptable to what the current situation is, what you are bringing to the table or not, and then invest in yourself. And that was one thing I think I learned too late in the process, the importance of really taking care of yourself and building yourself the way you're working to build your business.
Yeah.
So a long-winded way of answering that question.
No, I think it's spot on. And there's a saying, right? You can't pour from an empty cup. Right. Oftentimes when we talk about investment, we talk about it from the funding perspective, but we don't really consider ourselves, right? How are we investing in ourselves and our mental health as well? Joy, I'd love to hear from you. How would you go about scaling, or did you go about scaling your business?
Very carefully.
Right.
A lot of strategy. I talk to my mentees about this often. It's like, you may know people that are smart, but you want to, surround yourself with people that are knowledgeable, right? And so that is absolutely a key component to that. to a growth strategy, right?
Yeah.
Do I have the, like Karen said, the right people, the people that are competent?
Yeah,
Very slowly.
absolutely.
And you have to analyze everything. It's like, we may want to move quickly, but we hear in business, speed's important. But sometimes, speed is important, and it's also too important to throttle that speed. Timing and speed are friends.
Yeah, yeah. And that's such great advice for anyone that, is saying, hey, I want to grow my business in this way, right? In the next 2 months or the next 6 months, I want to make sure I have this many employees, or within the next 3 years. And it's like, hey, pause. And it goes back to what both you and Karen were saying around make sure you have a strategy in place. Slow it down a bit, right? You have a lot of time to build. We all know that in business, and a lot of time to learn. So you might as well do it the right way. Thank you so much for that, Joy. Xiomara, I'd love to dive into funding with you. Karen, I know you hinted on that just a little bit, but let's talk about that, right? How do you go about receiving financing? We all know the stats. It's 2.2% women overall that receive venture capital, but for Black women, it's 0.2%. So many of us don't see investments that way. Oftentimes we're bootstrapping ourselves. For anyone that's in that situation or thinking about going that route because they're not receiving funding, what are some other ways to do that? And how have you done that?
I have done a lot of creative financing funding. I'm grateful because there's so many different avenues that you can take. And because it's not as easy as just going to your bank and saying, hey, I want to start this business. Can you fund me $500,000 or $1 million, blah, blah, blah. They're like, wait, who are you? 1, you have no business. 2, and 3, you have no sales history. Like, we're not giving you any money.
Right. And what is your credit looking like?
Right? Yeah, right. So do you have business credit? And you're like, what's that? Because you haven't started. So I think that it's just one of the great ways that I started was through crowdfunding. So there's a lot of different platforms that you can start with crowdfunding with just your own personal network of friends and family and their networks, if they shared it, et cetera, your socials and things like that. It's an awesome, great way to start. That's one way that I started in the very beginning, because I did start just bootstrapping, really started with $1,300 and just built from there, from a sale of from 5 bags to 10 to pre-orders. There's so many different ways, especially if you have a product-based business. I think it's a little different than service-based. But then there's other sources that I tapped into. Working Solutions, which is a local nonprofit that is here in the Bay Area that helps businesses that are between 1 and 5 years old get funding up to $50,000. And they also provide amazing services, business advising, and also for just general information that a small business owner may have. And so that's one way. There's also different ways if you say, or have a e-commerce business. So say with Shopify or Clearco, those are other sources that you can actually gain capital through. And that is through your sales history that they see on your website. So that's a different way that you can pay back via daily sales on your website as well. So there's so many different ways that you can get creative in doing that. And I think for me, was just my experience is that as we've grown, we're going to be 7 years this month, end of this month, our 7th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I need to plan that party. And so I think as you keep getting older, you have more evidence that, hey, we're actually a profitable company. We're growing year over year. Give me some money. And yes, I'm a Black-owned, family-owned, woman-owned business. So I think that this would be great on your portfolio. So I think those are just so many different ways and you can, and obviously I think we're kind of hardwired, or maybe it's also just trendy in a sense to just build a business within 3 years and sell it for, $100 million, like, and get VC funding, go into these different spaces where you get an investor and blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, you don't have to do that. Like, not every business is set up that way. And you can keep your business your own. If you want to go the slow path, fine. Like, if you want to go the debt way, fine. If you want to bring in other partners who bring valuable strategic partnerships for you that will advance your business to different scales. So say if I partnered with an investor who has amazing connections with big box stores or with whoever it may be, I think that's a different conversation. But, you know, there's the financing, the funding can come in all different ways. If you have a rich uncle, hit him up too.
Okay. I love that. You definitely shared so many ways that folks can go about receiving funding, right? Would love to hear from you, Karen. How did you go about receiving funding?
So I went the self-funding route, and so I did not seek funding. And had I decided to stay in the industry, in the business, and expand at the rate that we could have, I would have needed to. And so as we've talked, I mean, there are some obvious benefits of funding yourself. You have complete control, complete autonomy, and that's a wonderful feeling. The cons of it are oftentimes you can't move as fast or as freely as you'd like to. And there were many a days when someone had to take less, and that someone was me. But it was all a choice. And I think life is all about choices. And that was just the choice that I made and was what worked for me.
Right, right. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Joy, would love to hear from you. How did you go about funding? Was it bootstrapping, or was it more of reaching out to investors? Would love to hear your story.
Bootstrapping. And, going back to, speed, time, right? When I think about funding, I think about, what's the cost of the money? I think about—
Say that again. Cost.
That makes a difference. Also, too, I think about, my stake being diluted. Like, do I want to go that route? Do I want to have power, and control? But, there's a time and a space for everything. But, I like to err on the side of caution. I like to be conservative around borrowing money.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Joy, you hit it on the nail there, because you're borrowing. And when you borrow money, you have to give it back. And one of the things that, I typically see is, founders are so excited to build their business and they have amazing ideas, and maybe they'll have investors coming in, but they give away all their equity. And now they no longer own their business, but they don't realize it until it's too late. I've seen that happen too many times. So thank you for definitely pointing out, those are some of that. We're like, what is it going to cost? Right? What's associated with that?
But the good news is that there are resources, where the cost of money isn't ridiculous, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all of you for sharing that. And there are a variety of ways that folks can go about getting funding. So that's awesome. But I want to dive in here a little bit about confidence. All right. How does one, maybe you're bootstrapping, maybe you have an investor, right? But how does one exude confidence in the face of a new partnership? And how do you then kind of push through that insecurity? Because it's something that's new. Do you fake it until you make it? How do you do it? Karen, I'd love to hear from you.
I love the question. I think most entrepreneurs try to present themselves as though they are confident. Mm-hmm. But having genuine confidence, authentic confidence, takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. And so I think it's really important to remember that. And even when you've got a ton of genuine, authentic confidence, it's not there 100% of the time. It just isn't. And for me, what I found is when I'm entering into a new space, when I was exploring different business partnerships and not feeling genuinely confident, there were a couple of things that I really focused on. And one is being okay, being vulnerable. It's okay to be vulnerable. Secondly, acknowledging that I didn't have all of the answers and being okay with that. I think, and last but not least, it was being willing to ask for guidance, being willing to ask for help, even when I felt that might be frowned upon, that might not be looked upon so favorably. Because again, I go back to point number one and that is just being okay, being vulnerable. Because I'm okay. I'm pretty good. And so my lack of understanding, my lack of knowledge, my lack of experience in any given area, I don't take that as a reflection on me as a person.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, what I want to kind of dive into here, and here's the last question of the day for each of you. What advice would you give to students today? And then, of course, any internship opportunities that you can share with our students, that would be awesome. I'd love to hear from you, Seymour.
I always go back to this number one rule of, for me, in terms of advice, is to have a plan. I don't care if you're starting a new diet, if you are trying to start a new business, or even just on your career journey. You got to have a plan, because then it actually makes your goal real. You actually know that what are the steps that you need to take to get to where you want to be. And it makes it real. Like, if you can have a plan in terms of the steps you need to take, the time it's going to take, and what you need to do. I think that's really important to have in life, and also just makes you be accountable for yourself and for what your actions may be. And I think that's really, really important. It's something that I didn't have when I started my business. I started my business on accident. It's because people wanted a bag that I owned. And so we just kind of just went with it and didn't have a plan. So 6 months in, I was like, oh, wait, we need to have a plan now, because we are going in many different directions. So to rein it in and everything like that, have a plan, sit down with your partners, if you have partners or whatnot, and then go from there. I think that's really kind of the best advice I could give.
Thank you so much. So everyone, make sure you're taking notes right now, because this is very, very important. Have a plan. Put that on the top of your list. Joy, I'd love to hear from you. What is your advice for students in our audience today?
Get experience, right? And the best way to get experience in your chosen field is to do an internship. So, and, get the tutelage of someone who is doing it, right? The second thing that I would advise them to do, particularly if they're, obviously if they're interested in being an entrepreneur, is to tap into resources around you. I've advised, one of my mentees, join the Chamber of Commerce in your area, join the Black Chamber of Commerce. There's a national one, and there are, chapters in every city. Make yourself familiar with the Small Business Association, so that you can learn about, how to form a business and how to get financing. And lastly, get a mentor.
Yeah.
Find a mentor, network your way into, being a mentee. Get a sponsor, right?
Yeah.
Work your way, network your way into a sponsorship relationship, someone that would be willing to sponsor you into, areas, scenarios that are going to be integral to your growth.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for dropping those gems. And I always say sponsors, those are the people that are talking about you when you're not in the room. They're talking about your business when you're not in the room, and people are like, oh my goodness, I have to speak to this person. It's even more powerful and impactful. So those are excellent tips. I hope everyone's writing down right now. Thank you so much, Joy. And Karen, I'd love to hear your advice.
Interestingly enough, what I would say builds on what we've already heard. Is, one, have a plan. 2, get the experience. And then 3, be a continuous student of life. Explore your options. Be open to new possibilities. There's more than one way to a desired endpoint. Find your path, and that path might not be sexy, It might not look the way that you envisioned it, but if you are first and foremost a student of life, you're never going to stop learning. You're always going to be developing skills. And I think most importantly, you're going to find your sense of self, you're going to find your passion, and you're going to find your purpose. And at the end of the day, I think that's what we all really want to do. Get a plan, get experience, be a student of life. Those would be the 3 things that I would say.
Oof. And on that note, we'll end with be a student of life, right? I'm a student today and I'm soaking every ounce of this conversation in. I want to thank you so much, Joy. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Samara, for the incredible gems that you have dropped today that will live on forever and ever and ever. I also want to thank everyone that's tuning in. Thank you to all the students and faculty members as well. This was such a dynamic conversation, and I hope you took a lot of notes today and you apply it, right? Make sure that you're applying this to your life and to your journey. And remember, everyone's journey is very different, but you got this, and we support you through it as well. Take care.